So first up today, we have Clive Jordan, who's the CEO and president of Planary. Planary is a really cool platform that kind of lives in this realm of setting up accommodated environments for projects and getting standards set up. I'll let Clive explain what his product is. I'll probably screw it up if I do, but Clive's got lots of industry experience. He's been around the industry for over 20 years. He's held senior positions at Trimble, at Vico, Graphisoft, most recently at Irvine. Great guy, very knowledgeable, and deep expertise on this ISO 19650 document. I'm going to have trouble saying that all day long. Clive, how did I do with my introduction?
You set up too much a lofty expectation. Bring it down a bit, and then I'll start.
Okay, well, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll let you correct whatever I got wrong there. Whereabouts in the world are you joining us from today?
I'm British, but I'm based in Southern California. So yeah, when I go back to my hometown in England, they've completely disowned me because apparently my accent has changed enough that I'm now not placed anywhere in the world. But
you're a man of no country now. They're probably just jealous of all the blue skies that you experienced down there.
There you go. Yeah, I should say no more about the weather. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get out of the way here and let you get into it. But thanks so much for joining us, and I'll come back on for the Q&A.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and hey, and welcome everyone. It's a big topic, so in 30 minutes we're hopefully going to both introduce and then also simplify it, because ISO 19650 is a workflow, it's a framework, and it's a not necessarily a new way, but it's a slightly improved way of doing what we've done for a long time. So hopefully I'll be able to describe why we should care about it and why it's useful for Canada to adopt, what it is, and then importantly, I'll finish with some resources, some really good, strong resources, training resources, etc. That will be supported as well by other people on a panel later. So let's get into it. But the first question we ask is, what does BIM look like for you? So for you specifically, what does BIM look like? It's an interesting question. Does it look like this? There's walls and floors and ceilings, beams, columns, foundations. Maybe this is what BIM looks like for you. But then maybe somebody else has another opinion, and having profiled beams and more layers in the flooring and a change in the elevation of ceiling when it happens, understanding that this is more BIM, but then also maybe this is more BIM. This is BIM for some people, understanding the undulation of the corrugation in the slab and the steel there. Is that required? Do we need to have all of these hangers and bracing? Do we need the understanding of the framing, what's inside the wall and inside of the foundations, the rebar? Do we need that as well? Well, as there's so many different people on our projects and so many different opinions of what BIM can be, it's really important to get that right. And to date, there have been loads of guidelines and standards and templates and things, so many that I can't put them all on the one slide. And they've been useful, but however, we're still having a problem defining clear requirements as an industry. And this is a survey in 2019 that says, scarily, that only 1.8%, less than 2% of teams are experiencing projects where they have clear BIM requirements. And that's a bit of a problem. And so people are saying there's information still missing, can't do their work. There are too many clashes. There are too many problems in projects. And that ranges then starts to mean when we're having clashes, there's a lot of rework. And it's unlike other industries that are providing more efficiency with these digital processes. And then communication is a big problem for us in the AEC space. Being able to communicate exactly what's required and then be able to follow that up is a really important task. So there are a few challenges. So let's kind of put that one out there, even with all of the existing history of creating standards for information management and for BIM. And it's a challenge with tools, it's a challenge with processes, it's a lot to do with that communication. So why ISO 19650? Why is this any different? Why is this something that we should care about, especially adopting in different regions and in Canada specifically? Well, ISO 19650, it helps to outline the concepts and principles for information management for BIM. Okay, that's good. It's applied to all different types of projects called assets, whether an asset is a whole facility or whether it's a pump in a specific room. It can apply to the whole workflow and the whole life cycle of projects. And it's starting to become a really unified approach. And the other really important thing is it's being adopted globally. So instead of the history of BIM standards and the way that they have been very much more country specific or maybe even just building specific, this is an adoption of a new way of, I say not a new and then I say a new, but it's a way of working that helps to standardize, and it is being adopted globally. So that's why we should pay attention to it. But what is it? What essentially is the ISO 19650 process, workflow, framework, standards? Let's take a deeper look. Well, the first one is, if you print it out, it's a lot of documentation, and it can be a difficult read to go through that. I have a stack, this is on my desk, the paper printed out, and I find myself reading. So when I first picked it up, I would read a paragraph, and then I would have to reread a paragraph and reread a paragraph. And the third time I was very clear on exactly what it meant, but then reading the next paragraph unpacked even more. And what I would beckon you to do is look for the guidance out there. So the UK BIM framework has created some fantastic, the UK BIM Alliance has created some great guidance notes that we will introduce in the resources. There's a lot of great training. So Paul later, the Operam Academy, and a whole bunch of others, BSI, that are providing some really good training and support. But that's the document. So let's first of all unpack the workflow. Inside of ISO 19650, we look, and part 2 specifically, out of the 5/6 parts, and we'll come back to that, there is a 8-step, there's an 8-step process that helps us to manage the information during the delivery. And those steps, if we unpack them, the first one is about assessment. What does the owner care about from an organization and project basis, and what needs to be exchanged? We go out with a tender, and there's a response to that tender. Somebody gets appointed. They mobilize. There's a structured way to mobilize. There are collaborative loops of information production and approvals, and then delivery and closeout, and learning from that, lessons learned. So if we look at that whole workflow in those 8 steps, unpacking each one of them provides us more detail. And the main process, the beating heart, although that beating heart is a little bit freaky, we unpack these steps even further. So if we look at the assessment and need, these steps inside, the second one calls out for us to, or for the, essentially the owner, the employer, the client, the appointing party, to define their project information requirements. And for this step here, the project information requirements, there are specific guidance notes and requirements. You shall do this. You shall consider this. These parts are where we start to see project scope. That's a very familiar term. The plan of work, the procurement route, all of these different things, but essentially being able to define something so that they can make an informed decision on who they're appointing. That workflow, from an ISO 19650 perspective, calls out many documents and resources, they're termed in the ISO workflow. They range from this set of organizational requirements, where we need to understand the business. So it's different potentially for a casino operator who wants to open their floor early to get customers in and to get revenue, versus maybe another company that's more interested in sustainability, and they would have different organizational requirements. It's why that owner, why that appointing party gets out of bed every day. For a specific project, there would be maybe more specific requirements related to that project type that they're working on. They are the project information requirements. We then have assets. We talked about an asset could be the overall building, could be a pump in a specific room, but we might need to know data about it. We might need to understand what's going on from an operation and maintenance perspective and how we can manage it. And then all of this forms into an set of exchange information requirements, the EIR. So the OIR, the PIR, the AIR, the EIR combines into the tender documentation, and we go on. So it can be a lot to cover. And this included in the traditional has been to date BIM execution planning workflow. To add to that, there's a pre-appointment and a post-appointment BIM execution plan. If you are sitting there with the look that Ewan has on his face with this visible confusion, it's okay. It's okay, because it's not uncommon to be fearful of something, especially in our industry, for change. But I assure you that it's well worth it, and it will come very naturally as you start to employ these terms and start to talk in using this vernacular. So let's go step by step. Let's just introduce step by step. So the first part is the framework. We looked at the 8 different steps from assessment and need to closing out a project. But on this diagram, we're going to include the appointing party, the lead appointed party, and the appointed parties or appointed party. These are the swim lanes, and this is the supply chain. So we think about the owner, the main, whether it's an architect or a contractor, somebody having that appointment, having that contract tied, that tender workflow with the appointing party, with the owner, with the employer, trying to mix these words so that we can understand them. But these are the terms that are used inside of the ISO documentation. And then we have these task teams that are delivering for the appointing party. Overall, I'm going to share this workflow in 3 main steps. The first one is defining the requirements for tender. The second one is responding, evaluating, and appointing somebody, so actually contracting. And the third one is really, there's lots of, and if you're on the call and you understand BIM, I'm not going to share how to create a model or how to use ArchiCAD or Tekla or Revit or anything like that. It's really about how in this latter half we can use the structured information requirements that have been defined in a more automated fashion to create the deliverables and also to automatically validate and verify those deliverables as well. This diagram is available as a download in PDF and some images, if that's useful for you to explain this to your teams as well. So let's take a look at the tender process to start with. This first setting up a project, understanding what the requirements are. It incorporates the assessment and need, so understanding, okay, I'm an owner, I'm building, as we mentioned, a casino. I want it to be open super quick, so I need to be sure on the schedule. I need to be understanding the cost, but I'm not that worried about it, so it doesn't form one of my highest requirements. And I'm going to either do this myself, or I'm going to appoint somebody outside, maybe an external consultant, to manage this on my behalf. And they are the information manager. This is the information management function, kicks off the process. You need to have somebody that understands what they're doing in order to put the right requirements in the right structure and follow that through. So the organizational, the project, and the asset information requirements all culminate into a set of tender documents, which are the exchange information requirements. The real crux of this is structured requirements in a way that people can digest and understand, following a workflow in this framework using ISO 19650. In order to speed that up, you might want to create templates for these, so the OIR, the PIR, etc. And inside of Plannerly, so plug for planning early, so plan early is the play on the name, is the ability to just pick from your templates or some industry standard templates that we will share with you and create the documents pretty quickly. The next part, you'll find that you're creating many, many documents. So you'll be creating a BIM execution plan or a exchange information set of requirements that are going to go out to many teams. And as soon as you start sending them out on different tools and different places, it can become quite unmanageable. You'll have your different acceptance criteria. You'll have to manage your information protocol, which is really the legal language around this. Managing those documents and keeping them in one place and managing them with permissions. This is just an example showing everyone has access to the EIR, but only specific teams maybe access to these. And then the appointment, the information protocol, the legal language is restricted from some people. It's maybe just tied to their contract. As we build these requirements, it's really good to build them around use cases. And from an owner's perspective, building an asset information requirement, is it that you need just a register of assets, or do you need to understand which items need planned maintenance, which items need preventative maintenance, and then what are the requirements from a detailed information perspective? So creating this, again, as a set of templates, whether you are an owner, whether you're an appointing party, or whether you're responding to that team, and being able to define this quickly, visually is a really, really good way. We cut through all of the confusion if you are using a visual approach, but also attaching the requirement in a structured way so that you have the information in this form. The storage tanks require this set of parameters at this stage by this team, and understanding that clearly in a structured way can help you validate that later on, and we'll come to that. Once you've formed the EIR, you're inviting people to tender. So you are inviting prospective teams. In this example, you're wanting to invite them to see it live, but what we're really wanting is to protect certain parts of that. So you don't want to always share everything. Being able to have a control and having a prospective team only see certain parts and manage permissions is really important. So all of that workflow, trying to go very quickly, is the first step of understanding the assessment and need. Why do we need to build this? And what are the requirements for exchange? The next step that we're going to unpack is the tender response, appointing somebody and appointing them to a specific set of requirements that are collaboratively created and involve the whole supply chain. So let's take a look at the appointment process. This is where we see the responses come in. So we've got multiple responses to the exchange information requirements. And those responses are incorporating a pre-appointment BIM execution plan. It's their response to say, this is why I am capable, why I have the capacity, answering the questions, making sure that the owner, the appointing party, is going to be confident in actually appointing this team, being able to define the risks so that you can mitigate against them, a mobilization plan. And this whole thing forms a tender response so that you can select, as an owner, as an appointing party, you can select a lead appointed party. This appointment workflow then steps into a more collaborative approach where you are starting to form what's called the task and master information and responsibility planning steps. These are essentially the tasks, but in a much more structured fashion. And this appointment workflow will unpack and try to understand how, whilst keeping it a database, you could keep a set of documents, but keeping in a database, it means that you're able to filter it and control it a lot more easily. So the first one was analyzing risk. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And when you plan for it and you plan early with these, and understanding whether it's a gap in skills and knowing that you need some additional resources to support you, whether it's consulting, whether it's training, and then also with the mitigation of if something can go wrong, will go wrong. If you're setting up a CDE, a common data environment for all of your information to be managed, you need to be able to test it. You should test it. You should have a testing plan, put in place hardware, software, etc., before you go on to build the project or start the project. We mentioned about tasks, and the task and master information delivery plans are where you are able to summarize all of the task team's tasks, whether it's a document that needs to be delivered or whether it's a virtual reality fly through for the owner, being able to define that in a structured fashion in the same place. Here we're selecting, we're putting in the asset information requirements along with the master information delivery plan and the responsibility matrix all in one place. The big part of what we're creating is that this data is structured in a way that teams can deliver. So we're creating this requirement for information containers that might be classified using uniformat, uniclass, omniclass, a whole bunch of other classification structures, and being able to define it in a way that people are used to seeing over a stage by stage or phase by phase, assigned to a team member in a structured way. This is really important because when you get to appointing somebody after defining those requirements in a collaborative form, you need to then filter. In this example, we're filtering for the handover of mega build documentation, the contractor, and creating a filtered set of appointment documents so that they don't get, in the traditional sense, that stack of tender documents, which includes everyone else's responsibilities and can sometimes be weighed. I remember being part of in a contractor, we would joke about how heavy the tender document was, and that would affect the bid. Well, if you're a savvy owner that wants to use this workflow to their benefit, creating these requirements in a database and being able to filter out those requirements in a way that people can understand them is critical. You're trying to be digital, so you should be using a digital signature process. It's another part of the Plannerly workflow that we incorporate. So you can simply click the people that you need a signature for and do business faster without needing to be there physically. And you can tie up that appointment workflow very, very quickly. The third step is looking at how we use that structured data to be able to deliver. And I'm going to go through a few examples, 4 examples very quickly here. But essentially, you can use any tools to do this. But the point is, if you've already defined all of those collaborative requirements and you've got a set of tasks, you've essentially just got to put a start and end date to those tasks to have a schedule of requirements of when people are doing things. And then you also might just be able to use a lean method of Kanban boards to update the status of those tasks and make it a lot easier for teams to simplify that process. There's also an ability to then check the deliverable against those requirements because you've got that set of data in a structured form. So a few ways of using that data. This one is using Dynamo to apply the shared parameters inside of Revit and also apply them to elements. This is just an example of how you can use that structured data. Same thing, but through XML and using the property manager inside of Graphisoft's ArchiCAD. Similar sort of concept and importing that data. Simple BIM for checking, not maybe used everywhere around the world, but we love to pick and find these examples. Simply checking against the requirements and flagging where they are not met. And then a great one to combine all of these data sources and use Power BI to understand what's going wrong and filter down, drill down to find out what those challenges are. So this is a summary quickly of those 3 steps where we assess what we need. This is the appointing party or somebody that they have appointed to do this, setting out the exchange information requirements. Responses come in, the tender response, and we actually appoint somebody and define more detailed requirements down to the task level, and then use that structured data in the downstream production of information. A few resources to finish so that you can also find out some more if this is something that you'd like to find out more about. We start with the standards. So number 1 is, even though they're very lengthy and wordy and going to be maybe bedtime reading, buy the standard and read it and be that communication into your team, into your company, so that you can help them to adopt this better way of managing information. Watch some videos. There's some great YouTube channels out there from BSI, Plannerly, we have one, lots of ISO videos on there, ISO 19650 videos. The UK BIM Alliance has a great channel with loads of really good content on the YouTube channel. The UK BIM framework, I beckon you to go here. The guidance from the different parts associated with, and then deeper guidance on specific workflows and processes. Really, really valuable. Go and check that out. And then if you're looking for structured training, there's a whole bunch out there, but to call out a few, Operam Academy has a great program, seeing some really, really good feedback on that. BIM Design Hub, BRE, BSI. There's a whole bunch of content out there. Choose the right one that's for you. Ask us as well. We've helped a lot of teams find the right places to go for that information. Download this simplified diagram if you have to explain it. And there are a set of 6 short videos on this web URL to go to. I'm sure we can share this afterwards. Attend some webinars. You're at a webinar now. If you want to have a lot more of a detailed explanation, there's a webinar series. 5 webinars in. The next one will come for the celebration party, the 6th webinar for the closeout. But these are all available recorded on this ISO 19650 webinar page. And then a lot of people have put a lot of effort in to create templates. And these are freely available for you as well with some explainer videos. And if you want to get access to them, not only to use them, but if you want to contribute to them and you want to start adopting and building these templates in Canada, then let us know and you can join the team. There's now over 200 review teams and they are in over 40 countries. It's 100% volunteer and it's an amazing, amazing job that these guys have done, creating and curating and managing these templates and also translating them into different languages. So as far as having a French Canadian, the application is in French. We've also got teams that are in Canada that are also translating some of those templates. If you want to join in, let us know, and we would love to add you to that team. So to summarize, hopefully I'm in time and we can have a couple of minutes for questions as well. But to summarize, do not get scared by the TLAs, the 3-letter acronyms, and also 4-letter acronyms that are included. Don't get scared by that terminology. It might be different to start with, but it will become more familiar. Just make sure that you are using, maybe as I did through this presentation, where you say, the owner, the employer, however you use the term today, but it's related to this term of appointing party. And the appointing party is potentially the appointor, and then you have an appointee. And some of that terminology is a challenge to get used to, but it will come over time. The second one is it's a framework. Don't ask for ISO 19650 or don't say, yes, I deliver using ISO 19650. ISO 19650, it's a framework. It's a way of defining requirements so that it can be understood and it can be the same workflow and same language that all teams are speaking on all projects, so that you can build more efficiencies and so that your services can be available to anyone around the world that is using it. And to that point, it is global. It's not a local standard anymore. It is being adopted in many countries. There's a concept of, and I'm sure that this will be discussed later in the presentations in the panel today. There's a concept of a national annex, which is something that gets pinned on the back and allows you to define specific requirements for local standards. So that's probably really useful here. And I would beckon you, get started today, build more efficiencies, and have that potential for winning more work. And join us if you've got questions in the virtual booth in the networking event. We will be there. Hopefully I will be there. Somebody else will be there from our team as well. So I will close, but hopefully some of that has been useful. And if there are questions, I don't know. I say I'm ready.
Great work. Thank you very much. We've got about 4 minutes for questions, and there have been quite a few questions that kind of came through the chat, and I would encourage everybody to continue doing that. We'll try to get to them. But certainly, I'm sure Clive would be willing to have a conversation with anyone that wants to have that conversation at the booth that you have set up, right? So certainly reconnect over there if we don't get to everything. My high level question on all of this is, can you describe the clear value proposition to using the ISO 19650 document and establishing this framework? Like, if I'm an owner and I'm thinking about making this part of my contract requirements that my suppliers all utilize this framework, why am I doing that? What is the value proposition?
So I think that you're going to get, in the end, a better, a more structured bid, but also a better price. The concept of me asking for BIM as an owner makes people, they're scared. But the concept of asking, using the ISO 19650 framework, you're able to define exactly what you need in a way that can be understood so that teams can say, this is exactly how much it's going to cost. And we are always going to be a gap away from that if we're not all adopting it. But if we can all adopt and talk the same language, everyone becomes more efficient. And that concept of, I mentioned, building a database of requirements, filtering per appointment, doing this digitally, it really has the opportunity for greater efficiencies and reducing prices because we're doing what we need to do, not because we're saying, oh, this is a BIM project, let's add the extra 5%, 10% that we usually do.
Right. I mean, we definitely don't want that scenario, right?
Right.
I mean, we've, as an organization, we've always kind of taken the standpoint that, you know, using BIM it's a business decision. If you're going to invest in your organization to train your people, buy technology, buy software, you should be targeting an efficiency, an increase of productivity, or being able to provide additional services, whatever those cases are. And this is kind of coming into the realm of, it becomes a project requirement and defining it in a very specific way. So, you know, is this, do you, in your experience with the companies that you've dealt with in international markets and whatnot, are you seeing general contractors and designers saying, okay, we got to use the ISO 19650, this is going to be more onerous, we have to think more or apply more resources? Or are you finding that the more this document pops up, that people are like, oh, you know, we know what that is, we know how to approach it, this actually makes it easier for us to bid on this work because we know how to what the cost is going to be, and this actually helps us define this deliverable that the client wants?
That's a really interesting question. And like, plainly and simply, I think that the world is still adopting it. It's not, you know, a through and through, this is the way we do things. You know, in the UK, they've had a mandate, and you know, we've been seeing a bigger adoption of, and the original PAS 1192, which was the creation or was the birth of the ISO standard, the ISO 19650 standard, has been there for a long time. But we've still got the same. It's our industry. You know, our industry doesn't run towards change and say, let's do this. And actually, our industry runs off confusion and poor communication and change orders. And, you know, this is how I make money. So if that supply chain is broken, it's difficult to put this in place, but it's the right way of doing things. If you were an independent party and you heard somebody talking about it, and it was, okay, this framework helps people be clear on what needs to happen, and it allows teams to bid for the right price. It allows them to deliver exactly what was required and have an automated checking workflow.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to do that. But our industry doesn't say, I'm ready. And also, we have been tainted by that set of standards that we've worked with in the past, that some of it works, some of it doesn't.
Right.
And the need for more and more guidance and more documentation to explain what they were saying there, and more documentation to explain what they were saying there, and another owner guide for this. And so it's a challenge because people are saying, you know, they've already done the BIM thing, and they're like, oh, this is just another standard.
Yeah.
But
would you say like the bulk of going through this process addresses when a model is needed for the client's long-term use, or would you say that this framework more addresses coordination amongst the design team and general contractors for the development and exchange of data as it relates to actualizing the building, not necessarily delivering a data set to run the building?
So what does the owner want? I mean, this is the point that we have been missing in all of the other standards. All of the other standards help delivery of something, but this standard helps define what's required all the way, not just, you know, I want BIM, or I want a better estimate, or I want, but all the way, what does the owner care about? So when we say the organizational requirements, why does the owner get out of bed? They're the one that pays the bill. And how do we help them better define what they need? How do we ask them the right questions so that we're not producing stuff that's not required? We're not overproducing at the wrong time. And so does it help in the delivery phase? Does it help in the owner then operating, maintaining the building? Only if they want it to, you know,
right.
Whole
so
bunch of
define those requirements.
Yeah. If somebody's going to, as an owner, they read online and they watch a video, oh, Kobe, you know, I need to have Kobe. Right. And they write in their requirement something about Kobe, but they're not set up to receive the data. They're not set up to use it. Why ask for it? So this is an opportunity to have what have been called plain language questions in the past, of getting into that workflow with the owner and saying, what do you really care about?
Right.
Not
So
from a BIM perspective, but from a useful for your business.
Right. Right on. Okay. Well, we're kind of out of time here. I mean, we could carry on this conversation,
Yeah,
I'm sure, but certainly anyone that wants to, chat with Clive. I know I didn't get to the questions here, but go into that networking booth during the break, or probably, I think this system will be live after we wrap up at the end of the day. So otherwise, just call him up. I'm sure he'll talk to you. Really appreciate the time, Clive. Great presentation, great opener for us.